Are you looking to grow revenues, increase profitability, or obtain financing? If so, you came to the right place.
Running a business is all about leadership. How do you become a better leader? Learn from the successful entrepreneurs and business owners how to lead your organization more effectively. That's why we created Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business, to help you succeed with your host, Andrew Frazier, Business Growth Pro and CFO and founder of the Small Business Pro University. Every Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern, we're joined by experienced entrepreneurs and business owners who share their secrets to success via live stream. Also, every Friday morning, we release a new podcast episode. Either way, you will learn about developing your business leadership skills from our roster of highly performing guest experts. Leadership Live is one of the many valuable resources provided through the Small Business Pro University, empowering business owners to learn, profit, and grow. Find out more at sbprou.com.
Good evening. Welcome back to Leadership Live at 8:05. This is Andrew Frazier, your host, and excited to be back with you again, talking small business. Each week, I look forward to having a special guest where we talk about key and relevant issues for entrepreneurs and business owners like you. And actually, this week is so timely, it's incredible. We scheduled the meet like months ago. And but because of what happened on Friday and what's going on right now, this is probably the best day it could have ever been. So someone's looking down on us in a good way. So this evening, my special guest is Alix Rubin, and she's going to be talking about the top 3 employment issues for business owners. Wouldn't you like to know what those are and what the answers are? You're going to get that tonight. So glad that you're here to join us. Alix has many years experience in employment law. She has her firm where she works with clients of all sizes here in New Jersey. And, definitely excited to be here. I could tell you more, but I'd probably mess it up. So I'm going to let her tell you more about who she is, how she got here, what she's doing. Hey Alix, welcome to Leadership Live at 8:05, and I'm excited about talking small business with you this evening.
Well, thank you, Andrew, for having me as a guest on your show. I'm excited to be here, especially this week, like you mentioned. Lots going on in the employment law world this week.
Okay, yeah, no, it's getting kind of exciting, and like I always say, the pandemic's been challenging, but with challenges come opportunities. And, it's about being able to find new solutions to the new problems. And,
absolutely.
Definitely in terms of employment, given the pandemic, given some of the legislation that's been put in place, the sands have been shifting. There's a lot of change, and not everybody knows what that means for them, and a lot of confusion. So it's great that you're here this evening to clarify some things and just help make sure people know that they're thinking about things in the right way. So definitely glad to have you, and thanks for joining.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so let's start out with who you are. I met you not too long ago, but I don't even know exactly who you are and where you came from and how you got here. So can you share that with us and enlighten us about some of that?
Sure, absolutely. So I grew up in Whitestone, Queens. I went to college in Massachusetts, Tufts University, and then I spent a little bit of time abroad, came back, went to journalism school, and then I got bored and I decided to go to law school. Journalism school was a great stepping stone for law school for me because writing skills I have found in my legal career are really, really important. And I was able to hone those skills in journalism school. And I mean, I was also an English and French major. I always liked to write. And now I'm using my writing to, to be persuasive, and to advise and counsel, in particular, employers. Although I do work with employees as well, just as just to let everybody know that. I started my firm. It'll be 11 years in a week. Actually, next week, it'll be 11 years. I've had my own firm. I just celebrated my 25th reunion from the University of Pennsylvania Law School. Hard to believe. I graduated law school 25 years ago. And I got into employment law really because, number one, I liked the class in law school, but more than that, I worked for the legal clinic at my law school, and my very first case in the clinic was an employment law case. And that really piqued my interest. And then I also worked on the Labor and Employment Law Journal at law school. Again, I was writing about employment law. So I decided when I graduated that I really wanted to focus my practice on employment law. And now, when you go to work for a big firm, they don't let you do that right away. But it was always part of my practice. And eventually, when I went from two large firms, started at two large firms, then a smaller firm, I started to really focus on employment law. And then when I opened my own shop, I decided that's it. I'm only going to do employment law. So that's what I do exclusively.
So, okay, so you're a New Yorker, huh?
Yeah, I'm a New Yorker.
and you crossed the pond into New Jersey.
I can't tell you how many times I've been back and forth and had to change my driver's license. And then I lived in Pennsylvania too. My husband's from Philadelphia.
Okay.
That's where I went to law school and journalism school. So yeah, that's my tri-state, even though I know Connecticut is technically our tri-state up here.
Okay. Yeah, no, excellent. So, one thing that you mentioned that I think is worth note in one of the most important things you can do to increase your value as a business owner or an employee is increase your communication skills. Learn how to write, learn how to communicate, and that you had a strong foundation because of that. Can you share a little bit about how that's helped you? And because I definitely want to at least highlight that. We're going to get to the main topic, but that was of interest.
What's interesting about that is my son is actually a journalist now. I don't think he's going to go to law school, but he's in the journalism field. But putting that aside, I noticed when I was in law school that some of my classmates were really struggling with the writing aspect of what we had to do. We call it writing briefs, when you have to write persuasive arguments for the court. I didn't struggle with that. The only, I did have to kind of pivot, as everybody has done now this last year in the pandemic, but I did have to pivot, kind of tweak my writing skills, write in a different style. There's the journalism style, and then there's the legal style, but without, really the journalism helped me write in plain English, which a lot of lawyers unfortunately don't know how to do. But I still had to pivot things a little bit because being persuasive is different from being informative. And, there's an art to both. So that's really, that. And you mentioned communication, Andrew, and that's, communication is much broader than just writing. It's knowing how to talk to people, knowing how to get information from people, knowing how to interview. So a big part of a journalist's job is interviewing, right? And that's a big part of a lawyer's job too, is interviewing your clients. We don't always call it that, but that's really what it is, getting the information from your clients so what do they need? What do they really need help with? And you have to really dig deep, and because sometimes, lay people don't know what lawyers know, and we have to kind of dig to see what is it that's the real problem that we can help with as lawyers.
Okay, great. So yeah, no, definitely that. When I went to school, I studied engineering, and I actually picked a school that you didn't have to take any writing classes. And little did I know that I was missing out on the most important thing, so I had to learn the hard way. But as of now, I have very good writing skills, but
and I think as little math and science as possible.
But the writing will take you further than the math and science will. In many in many respects, but it's better to have both. So
Yeah.
excellent. So welcome. Thanks for, we got people in the crowd joining us. Thanks for joining us. Hey, Karen, welcome again. Good to see you. You got a little bit of an intro to Alix, but also if you want to check her out a little bit more, here's her LinkedIn profile. I put it in the chat, so definitely, don't tune out to go to her LinkedIn profile. But if you're good at multitasking, we can, we can live with that. So great. So Alix, before we get started and really talk about three things that every employer needs to know, especially right now. What I want to do is we usually have a short video that talks about the Small Business Pro University that is the producer of our show here tonight, and then we'll come back and we'll start talking about those three things that every employer should know. So let's take a look and see what it's all about. Do you own your business, or does it own you? Is your business growing, and are you making enough money? As a business owner, there are so many things you need to know to become more successful. Hello, my name is Andrew Frazier, the Business Growth Pro and CFO. I created the Small Business Pro University for you. Small Business Pro University has self-paced, dynamic, multimedia learning experiences created by more than 20 instructors who are business owners just like you. Small Business Pro University will empower you to become a masterpreneur by learning the secrets to creating a successful enterprise, to go from working in your business to working on your business. Take advantage of our strategic coaching program, or just simply choose the courses that you need at www.sbprou.com. We will empower you to thrive and not just survive, and make more money in any business environment. Welcome back to Leadership Live at 8:05, here with Alix Rubin, and we're going to be talking about really three key employment law issues that you need to be aware of today. And not only do you need to be aware of, you need to understand how they've changed. So first of all, what are these three things, Alix? There's a lot of employment law issues that could be out there. What are the three top ones right now?
And look, obviously there are more than three, but we picked the three that we feel are the most topical for at least this week. So it's masks, which everybody's heard about a lot about lately. Vaccinations, again, everybody's heard a lot about those lately, and cannabis, which is also pretty current in the news, and they all affect employers and employees. They all affect the workplace.
Definitely, each of those, they're different, but they have some similarities or some overlap.
Yes.
So, definitely, given what's going on with COVID, a lot of challenges, unfortunately a lot of deaths. You've got the vaccines out, you've got the vaxxers, you got the anti-vaxxers, you got the I'm not sure crowd. Let's talk about vaccines. I just got my second one last Wednesday, so in about a week I'll be safe. But everybody has their own view on that. But
sure.
What's going on in terms of getting vaccinated, the vaccines? Is it going to keep you from being able to do stuff? How is that working these days as an employer?
Yeah. So the big question for employers is, can employers require their employees to get vaccinated in order to come back into the workplace? That's a huge issue. And I will tell you that I have not been recommending that employees do that. Are they allowed to do that under the law? Yes. The EEOC, which is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, that's the federal agency that regulates the employment laws, has come out a while ago and said it's okay for employers to require it. But there are two exceptions. The two exceptions are, number one, if an employee has a disability that prevents him or her from getting the vaccine, then obviously the employer cannot require it and would need to make what's called a reasonable accommodation for that employee, either allow that employee to continue to work from home, put up the barriers, mask wearing, or, make sure there's social distancing. And we're going to talk a little more about that too. As long as these rules are still in effect, and we'll talk more about that too regarding the mask. So yes, Andrew, as you said earlier, there's a lot of overlap here between masks and vaccines. But employer cannot require an employee whose doctor says you cannot get the vaccine because you're high risk for having some bad reaction or what have you. I don't think there are too many people in that category, but there may be a few. Now there is a second exception, and that is for someone who has what's called, under the law, a sincerely held religious belief that, there are people whose religion forbids them from getting any type of vaccine. And again, so an employer, that would be, a problem. That would be religious discrimination. And so that would be an issue too. And again, an employer would have to make an accommodation for that employee. Other than that, people have asked, well, what if your employee is pregnant? Can you force a pregnant woman to get the vaccine since they didn't test these vaccines on pregnant women? Well, you probably could. I wouldn't recommend it, but you probably could under the law. Again, unless the woman's doctor, who's following her pregnancy, says no, she cannot get the vaccine. There hasn't been any evidence that the vaccines. And again, I'm not a doctor, so don't take this as medical advice. But there hasn't been any evidence, as far as I know, that it's a problem for pregnant women. In fact, it would protect the unborn child as well, from what I've heard and understand. And again, pregnancy is a short-term thing, so perhaps depending on at what stage she's in, she could wait and get it a little later, if that's a concern. But yes, you could fire an employee if your policy, and again, as long as you apply the policy across the board and require everyone, unless they meet one of those two exceptions I just mentioned, if you require everyone to have the vaccine to come back into the office, well, then you could fire an employee or not allow them to come back to work, which I guess would be the equivalent of firing them unless they can work from home and you're okay with that as the employer. Then that's okay. But again, I don't recommend it.
Okay.
So yeah, I'll let Andrew ask me another question related to this.
Okay, so definitely, it's like you can, but at your own risk, because
right.
There could be discrimination. But now you could have problems the other way too, because if there's people who are vaccinated that have a problem working alongside people who are not vaccinated, yes. What are their rights, and how should you consider dealing with that?
Well, and this gets into the mask wearing, then you keep the mask protocols that you had before the CDC changed its guidelines and before Governor Murphy made his announcement, which actually there's a caveat to that, which I'll explain in a bit. But, you keep those guidelines in place. You keep the barriers up. You make sure that people are social distancing, or that people, you really don't want to discriminate against people who haven't gotten the vaccine. Again, because maybe it's because they have a disability or a religious belief. So then you're discriminating again. So it's a real touchy situation, and it could be a fine line. And the other thing is, you don't want, as an employer, before the pandemic, employers were not allowed to ask medical questions of employees unless it had something to do with their ability to perform the job. And there's, again, a fine line there. Currently, during the pandemic, employers can ask about certain medical issues, like, do you have a cough, do you have a fever, sore throat, etc., all this COVID symptoms, to make sure that everybody in the workplace is safe. You can ask if someone's been vaccinated. Now, but what you cannot ask is if they're not vaccinated, why? Unless you're again, it's a fine line. Unless you're trying to determine, are they not getting vaccinated because they just don't want to? Or is it because of one of the exceptions, disability or religious belief? But what about like employees asking each other? That could get really tricky, right? And then you could have, like you were saying, Andrew, the vaxxers and the anti-vaxxers. And then you've got this whole, war going on in your workplace, which you really don't want. So it can be an issue, but I think employers just have to deal with it, in the best way possible, seek some advice, some outside advice, legal advice, and just, maybe don't mandate it, but encourage it. And when I say encourage it, well, without getting into politics, I actually like what President Biden said was that, give everybody a day off, give them that day, a day, or if they need more, but give them that time off to get the vaccine and to recover from it. And don't count it as a regular paid time off or sick day. That's an extra day. Now, the advantage to employers of this, well, maybe it's not an advantage, but it's a win-win because the employee gets an extra paid day off. Granted, they're getting, shot in the arm and may not feel so well afterwards, maybe just for a couple hours. But also the employer still gets a tax credit. Now, this goes back to when the Families First Coronavirus Response Act was still in effect last year, but that has continued in terms of the payroll tax credit. If employers voluntarily give their employees that time off and now getting a vaccine is one of the criteria, or recovering from getting the vaccine, they get that payroll tax credit for that sick time that got paid. So it's really a win-win. It's not costing the employer any more money.
Great thing. So we have a question for you. This gets pretty deep. So we have a question from Miani. Thanks, Miani, for sharing. And you can see it on the screen. What if someone has been previously vaccinated? After that, can they claim a religious exemption for the situation?
So I'm not sure. I'm sorry. I'm not sure I understand the question. If the person's been vaccinated, I don't think they would have a religious objection because they've already been vaccinated.
Well, it may be that they've had other vaccines before, but they don't want to get this one.
This one. Okay. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that, Andrew. Yes. That's interesting. Now my understanding, again, I'm not an expert on religion, certainly not on religions that are anti-vaccines, but my understanding is that those religions that forbid vaccination, it's across the board. So those people don't get flu vaccines either. That's my understanding. Why would a religion have an objection to the COVID vaccine versus the flu vaccine? Now, I know there are other issues regarding the two different types of vaccines because flu vaccines have been, officially approved by the FDA. The COVID vaccines, it's still emergency use only, but that's not a religious objection in my mind. That's more of, maybe philosophical or maybe some other type of objection, which is not one of the exceptions.
Okay, cool. So we've talked about vaccines. We got one more question on vaccines, and really in the state of New Jersey, because that's where we are, and every state has different laws potentially. There are still some places that the vaccine is required, right? Or
Yes.
And so where would it be required?
So I don't believe it's required anywhere, even in New Jersey by law. But typically hospitals, doctor's offices, any healthcare facility, nursing home. And I've actually just learned that a number of restaurants are requiring it as well. So it's typically public facing businesses that are requiring it, but it's not required by law anywhere. And actually it cannot be because it's emergency use only. And actually when you some of you may not even remember if you did get the vaccine, but you have to sign something that says, or when you signed up for your appointment, you have to sign something that says, I understand that this is emergency use only, and I am voluntarily agreeing to receive the vaccine. So, but an employer can require it. I just heard of a national chain restaurant that just decided to require the vaccine of all its employees.
Okay. So, yeah, I know there was a big thing in Florida with the cruise lines because,
Yes.
if you go on a cruise, they're not letting you go unless you're vaccinated.
Right.
Which,
Well, that's the issue of showing your vaccination card. And I know the governor of Florida does not permit that employers or anybody actually to request the vaccine card. Or what they're now terming the vaccine passport, although it's a card. So yeah, the state of Florida has outlawed requiring showing your vaccination card. So that makes it difficult. So how do you know who has the vaccine and who doesn't? Like, people are not, unfortunately, people don't always tell the truth, right? Not to mention there are these schemes out there now where people are, I hate to say it, but people are manufacturing those cards fraudulently. Yeah,
unfortunately.
Yeah.
So I think we beat the vaccination to death. So unless there's any any further questions, let's move on. Actually, Miani asked about, is that a law? So Governor Murphy Friday, was that a law? I guess there's no law that you have to get it.
About the vaccine, no. What Governor Murphy, he announced, I believe he announced it yesterday, but at any rate, yes, his announcement was about masks and about lifting the mask mandate, about lifting the 6 feet apart social distancing mandates, and about in another week, that's going to happen the end of this week, but there are some caveats to that. And then about the end of next week, lifting the capacity, numbers of people who can gather restrictions, both indoors and outdoors. And I don't know all those numbers, but that's not really an employment related thing unless you're in that business. And then you should know what those are. But you can look that up. I believe we're providing the link. Andrew's going to provide the link to the press release, and then there's a link to the actual, it's an executive order, which has the force of law because we are still in a state of emergencies in New Jersey. So the governor can still issue executive orders. And this new executive order, so let me go back to the masks. When the CDC guidance came out 2 weeks ago, a lot of people thought, I don't have to wear my mask anymore. Well, that wasn't true in New Jersey. New Jersey, the outdoors, I believe you didn't have to wear a mask anymore, but indoors you still did. Now, what's interesting about the governor's executive order is that it's also not for everybody indoors. It's only for public venues, right? Public facing businesses and public venues where, believe it or not, you don't have to wear a mask anymore. Now, the CDC guidance is if you're vaccinated, fully vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask. If you're not, well, we recommend that you still do. New Jersey, they really didn't want to make that distinction. I'm not clear what the recommendation is. Of course, in my opinion, if you're not fully vaccinated, you're better protected if you wear a mask. But that's just my opinion. It's not the law. So in the workplace, think about it. Most offices, I'm not talking about restaurants or businesses, that are open to the public, or retail, restaurants, etc. You don't have to wear a mask indoors anymore, but an office building, you still do. So that's pretty clear in the governor's new executive order. That mask mandate has not been lifted yet. So it's interesting, and you still have to social distance. And the rule has been since last fall that in an office, if you're in your own private office or at your own workstation and no one else is within 6 feet of you, you can take your mask off. But as soon as you're close to people, people are in your space, so to speak, or you get up from your desk and go out into a common area, you have to put your mask on. And that's still the case, unless you're in a restaurant or a hotel, or anything, or supermarket, places like that, which I think is actually, to me, that's counterintuitive. I think the more people that are present, the more risk there is of transmission, as opposed to in a small office like mine, for example.
Great. So now, just a follow-on question for Miani.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you can't ask for people for vaccine cards. Is that law here in New Jersey?
No, just as far as I know, it may be in other states. I know for a fact it isn't. It is the law in Florida. No, if you're in New Jersey, you can.
Okay.
And, the fact is, if you're, as an employer, if you're giving your employee the day off and you want to collect get the credit, the payroll tax credit, well, you never know when the IRS is going to come knocking on your door to say, well, how do you, prove to us that this was because the employee had the vaccine? Well, how do you prove it? If you have a copy of the employee's vaccine card, you can prove it that way. The other way, I suppose you could, if you don't want to have that medical information, you could, have the employee sign something that says, on this date and this date, I received the vaccine. If you do get a copy of that card as an employer, you must keep it in a separate file, a separate medical confidential file, like you would any other medical documentation that you might have on employees for, legitimate reasons.
Okay, great. No, this has been interesting. A lot of twists and turns.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of stuff that's law, almost law, different laws, different places. So definitely, and it's still changing. It's ever changing. So
yes, it is. It's hard to keep up with it, but that's what I do.
Right, but this is helpful. I mean, definitely I learned some stuff. I'm sure everybody who's out there has learned some things. We got some great questions, some great comments. Keep them coming. Thanks for joining. If you like it, feel free to send the comments, send questions, and we'll work to get on them. But just want to take a quick break. One of the things that I put together for entrepreneurs and business owners as a way to help them grow is the Masterpreneur Playbook. So just want to introduce you to that real quick. So we'll show a short video and then we'll be back talking with Alix about the next two of the three key things you need to know as an employer in this environment. Thanks.
The best sports teams have a proven playbook. Everyone should have one. We've got one for you. Because there are so many things you need to know as a business owner. Many business owners work longer and harder for less money than if they had a job, because they are on the wrong path.
Break that cycle with the Masterpreneur Playbook, a 5-step business growth plan that addresses the challenges that business owners face going from working in their business to working on their business. Hello, my name is Andrew Frazier, a business growth pro and CFO. The Masterpreneur Playbook incorporates proven strategies for successfully growing your business that I discovered during my personal journey.
Is there any reason you wouldn't want to accelerate the growth of your business, make more money, and have more free time? Of course you would. Don't hesitate. Visit www.spprou.com to download a complimentary copy of the Masterpreneur Playbook today.
Welcome back to Leadership Live, Talking Small Business. I'm here with Alix Rubin, and we've been talking about the three things that you need to know as a business owner, especially now. And the first one is about vaccinations. But we talked a little bit about masks, which is the second one. But there's places you have to wear a mask, and then a lot of places you may not. Where do you have to wear a mask, and where do the employees have to wear a mask?
Yes, so you still have to wear a mask on an airplane. I was actually on an airplane last month, and everybody was wearing a mask on the plane and also in the airport. Same with trains, buses, subways, and any transit station, right? Any public transportation or public transportation station or depot, you must wear a mask. So that is still in effect. And And that's actually federal law. At least at the airports it is, because they have control of the airports and airplanes. Hospitals, doctors' offices, nursing homes, clinics, anything healthcare related. Indoors, you have to wear a mask. Childcare centers as well, because children under 12 are still not able to be vaccinated. There are no vaccines available for them yet. So childcare centers and school and elementary schools. And I believe up until, let's see, it's been a while. So 12 years old is what grade? Maybe you know this, Andrew, up until whatever that grade is.
Probably
So maybe
seven.
not, I'm sorry, 7. So I
Yes.
suppose elementary and middle schools. I'm not sure about high schools. I'd have to check that. But maybe not high schools, because high school students can be vaccinated now. And I understand a lot of them are very excited to get vaccinated.
Yeah. Well, if you're going to be around a lot of different people, that significantly increases your likelihood of contracting it. So,
Yes.
and in high schools, there's a million kids, and so.
Well, yeah, and who has, a lot of the high school students have younger brothers and sisters. So there you go. So I think it's pretty much throughout the schools. So
Yes.
yeah, teachers, you still have to wear your mask.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Well, definitely. That's key to know. Miani said thank you, and she just wanted to make sure she wasn't breaking the law. She asked for the cards today. So that
Yes.
was good news to her.
You've asked your employees to provide the vaccine cards if they want to travel. Sure. I mean, look, you can, employers have a right to be concerned about employees who are traveling still, although the travel restrictions have been lifted. But, New Jersey was probably one of the last states to lift a lot of these restrictions. And if you're traveling internationally, well, under federal law, you have to get tested before you're allowed to come back to the U.S. That is still in place, as far as I know. So sure, I mean, whatever, that is still allowed. You can ask for that. Again, like I said, keep that. That's confidential medical information. You're allowed to ask for it, but keep it in a separate file that, only, human resources or the owner of the company has access to.
Okay, great. So now let's shift to a different conversation that has been going on long before COVID, and but finally, a legislation has come to pass that has made it an option, or at least a legal option. So, I guess in New Jersey and New York, they have the ability to have legal use of cannabis. And, how do you deal with that as an employer? I mean, in the past, you could use that to not hire people. You could use that to fire people. What does that mean going forward? And what are you responsible for?
Yes. So it's adult use cannabis. So obviously children are not generally in the workforce. So it is adult use. In New Jersey and also New York, there's been, medical cannabis, right, has been legal for a while. And there is a statute in New Jersey that has allowed medical use of cannabis, and employers had to accommodate employees who were using cannabis for medical reasons, just like they would accommodate any other, disability or illness. The issue really with cannabis is influence, right? Is the employee under the influence? It's very different from alcohol in that you have a certain blood alcohol level, you're under the influence, you're flagged, you're drunk, right? You can't work. Cannabis is different. I mean, you could test positive for cannabis and not be under the influence because it stays in your system longer. So what the New Jersey legislature has done, they've issued regulations that require employers to hire what they call DREs, drug recognition experts. And these are people who are specifically trained. I believe they're using police protocol to be trained And this hasn't actually happened yet, but it's happening. The regulation was, issued, but it's just in its infancy. These drug recognition experts are the ones who determine if an employee is under the influence at work. So at work is really key, right? As an employer, it is, well, New York actually has a law on the books that says you cannot regulate off-duty conduct. And that could be, partaking of cannabis off duty, as long as it doesn't impact the job. And you should be cautious about that in New Jersey too, about trying to, influence an employee, what an employee does after hours, right? Again, as long as it doesn't impact what they do on the job. So yes, you can forbid use of cannabis on the job. And you can certainly discipline and or fire employees who are found to be under the influence of cannabis, particularly if it's impacting their work. So it can get a little tricky. I mean, testing, again, if you're a federal contractor, well, that's a whole other story, because cannabis is still illegal under federal law. So then you can, preclude anyone who uses cannabis anywhere from working for a federal contractor. But that's a different issue. If your, business employs people in safety sensitive positions like bus drivers, truck drivers, using, heavy equipment, where they really need to have their faculties, right? They need to know, be very clear headed and know what they're doing. Again, it's still going to be all about recognizing, having an expert, a drug recognition expert, tell you this person is under the influence while they're at work. Just because they have it in their system doesn't mean they're under the influence.
Okay, so that sounds expensive, especially if you're a small business
Yes.
with 10 people.
Could be.
So definitely, it's another case. Most legislation doesn't really think about the smaller businesses and how
Right.
it impacts them.
Now, I suppose you could designate an employee to go for the training, but the training's probably going to cost something. But, I suppose you can do that. Again, the regulations aren't all that clear about everything. They haven't hashed it all out yet, but they're getting there.
Okay. So, yeah, no, definitely, it's going to continue to change. We're going to continue to evolve. We'll probably have to have you back on again so you can tell us how things have changed.
Absolutely.
Which is great. We're coming up on I guess almost 10 to 9. I told you it would go fast. It goes really fast, especially when you're having a good conversation, talk about small business. So now, these are the 3 key things business owners need to know that are real current. But maybe if we could take a second to just talk a little bit about, what kind of things do you need to do to keep from getting sued? Because that's your greatest fear.
Oh boy, there are a lot of things. Well, if you have a problem employee whom you feel you need to fire, just be careful about that. Make sure you document their either whether it's poor performance or misconduct or attitude. Just keep a running record of their behavior so that when it does come time to let them go, you've got that documentation. I mean, look, New Jersey's in what's called an at-will employment state, which means you can let an employee go for any reason or no reason. But be careful. It cannot be an illegal reason or a discriminatory reason. So if that person whom you want to fire is a minority, and women are included in that. So, a woman, black, women, blacks, Hispanics, any nationality that's not American, LGBTQ, someone with a disability, someone who might maybe complained about a workplace incident or something they thought was fraudulent or illegal in the workplace, a whistleblower. Be really careful with people like that when you're firing them. But really, for anybody, you want to tell the employee why. You don't have to give them the whole song and dance, the whole long story, but people want to know. People get really angry and upset when they're let go and they have no clue why, and nobody tells them why. I had a case once where the employee, that's all he wanted. I mean, he sued my client, and all he got a little bit of money too, but all he really wanted was a reasonable explanation. And if you can provide that, well, and then I obviously have them sign a severance agreement, pay them a little bit of money, and have them sign away, their right to sue, and then you're in good shape. So that's my tip of the day in terms of firing employees.
Okay, great. Well, definitely, you know, that's something you want to be careful of because
Yeah,
once you get in that situation, it can take on a life of its own. I've
absolutely.
experienced it with clients, and it's not fun, and it's very stressful, and
Yes.
makes it hard to focus on your real job and making sure your business is successful, so your remaining employees can have a good livelihood as well. So
Yeah,
that's cool.
there's a phrase I use with all my clients: hire slow, fire fast.
Okay, so yeah, yeah, no, it's good because it usually becomes fairly evident fairly quick if someone's not going to work out. So
Yeah.
it's better just to cut ties and let them move on, and you move on. So that makes a lot of sense. So what I want to do, since we're getting real close, we're getting to where everybody's going to be able to come out and do things. So
Hmm.
a lot of virtual events might start becoming more live, and possibly combinations of live virtual events, live and virtual. What has your experience been during the pandemic? You've probably been to virtual stuff, live stuff. Have you been to a combination? And where do you think things are going in the future with this?
I think, well, first of all, with the warmer weather, so we can do more outside again. There are going to be over the summer more live events, more like networking type things, right? I mean, obviously, a speaker is not all that conducive to being outdoors. But I think people are starting to get more comfortable, and with the limits on, numbers of people who can gather being lifted in, I guess, another almost 2 weeks. That's going to open up, and I think people will start doing live events again. I just went to a small networking thing at an outdoors at a restaurant last night, and it was like a happy hour, and it was nice to see people in person again.
Hmm.
It really makes a bit of a difference. I think the courts are starting to open up as well. I just listened into a panel of judges earlier today about what it's been like throughout the pandemic to be a judge,
Hmm.
and now they're still working from home, but soon some of them are starting to go back to the courtroom. So things are gradually opening up. I think we've learned a lot in the pandemic that, and again, this isn't all specifically employment law. This is just my experience that we really, should take better advantage and can take better advantage of technology. And you don't always have to do things live, right? You can, sometimes it's just more convenient to do it on the screen, do it online. If people, don't have to travel, you can jump from one event to another pretty quickly without worrying about travel time in between or traffic for that matter. So,
Yep. No, definitely, definitely. Um, got another question for you from
yeah.
Yanni, and this one is, if you have a no smoking policy, does that cover cannabis?
Hmm.
And do we need to update our handbook to note cannabis?
I think you should. I think you should. I mean, because smoking, generally, people understand that to mean tobacco, although it could mean cannabis. The other issue about cannabis is it's not just smoked these days. I mean, there are edibles too. So you may want to, cover that too, like no cannabis use in the workplace, period. Um, so yes, I would update the handbook for sure.
Okay, great, great. So, now that the weather's breaking, you know, for I guess, for about 10 years now, up until before the pandemic, I used to run the Power Breakfast events out of the Newark area, which was, great experience. Really developed a lot of connections. We've had over 1,000 people attend the events. It's led to 10 million plus dollars worth of, economic increase in the business community, as well as people have made connections to get over $10 million of financing as a result. So something that, we may look at doing again in the, once things calm down. But here's a quick video just to let people know about it. And then we're going to come back. Alix, we're going to let you leave us off with some key things to take away, and then we'll close out. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. My name is Andrew Frazier from A&J Management. One of the things we're here to do is supercharge your day. What we do as part of our business, as an outgrowth of our business, is we have a series of brain trust initiatives that we're continuing to build on. And really through the brain trust initiatives, what we're doing is we're bringing a higher level of intellectual capital to bear. So we're bringing in resources, experts, expertise from across the country to share best practices and connect with business owners, entrepreneurs, organizational leaders to help you be more effective in what you do.
What I'm learning from Power Breakfast that sets it apart from other networking opportunities is how my local activities integrate and are part of the larger business community.
It brings together people of all industries who can share all different levels of expertise and can educate each other on different changing nature and evolving regulatory legal landscape, as well as all facets of all industries that they might not otherwise be privy to.
The Power Breakfast is so important for the entrepreneurial community because it gives the various business people who come together an opportunity to interact, discover what it is they can do to help each other and also do some business.
From a corporate perspective, Marcia McLennan, and or for that matter, Andrew and his business model, his branding, none of us can succeed individually. We need partnership. Collaboration is the new norm.
Since 2011, the Power Breakfast has been held in the northern New Jersey area, but over the next couple of years, we expect to expand into Pennsylvania and New York as well.
Okay, good evening. We're back here live at 8:05 talking small business. We're going to close out. Alix is going to give you some words of wisdom and key takeaways from this evening. And, also I put Alix's website in the chat. So if you want to learn more or have an issue that you need to talk to someone about, there you have it. So Alix.
Yeah, well, thank you, Andrew. So just to recap, the three issues we talked about. Vaccinations, right? And can employers require them? They can, but I actually recommend that you just recommend them. Encourage your employees to get the vaccine and give them an incentive like the day off, right? It's a win-win. You'll get the payroll tax credit for that. Masks, that's huge this week because, certain mask restrictions have been mask wearing has been lifted. But keep in mind that that's just public facing business, public indoor public areas. For private indoor businesses, your employees still have to wear masks under the governor of New Jersey's executive order. And then finally, cannabis. The key issue in testing and disciplining employees is that employee under the influence at work? And then just one more thing that I wanted to mention about, going back to the office for businesses that have been working from home and remotely. You may have to make some reasonable accommodations for people who cannot work in the office, who need to work from home for whatever reason, as long as it's a legitimate reason. But, it's going to be harder to, employers are going to have a little bit of a problem. I foresee some employees may be resistant to coming back to the office. They actually like working from home, but look, you can mandate that everybody has to be back in the office. Again, as long as that employee doesn't have some type of illness or disability that requires them to be at home.
Definitely appreciate having you on the show. Great information. We had good questions, good comments, good feedback. And that's what Leadership Live is all about, really bringing you access to, resources, tools, people that can help you be more successful in your business. So thanks again, Alix.
Thank you, Andrew. And look, anybody needs some more information, please call my office. You'll talk to my paralegal and we'll set you up on a strategy session.
Okay, cool. And then, Alix also gave us some videos that you can check out to learn more. So we're going to put those in the chat too. And, definitely, it was great having you. Great talking small business once again. So again,
thank you,
Alix Rubin. Okay, excellent. So now let's take a look. Each week, very excited. This week we talked about legal issues. Next week we're going to shift gears and we're actually going to be talking about buying a business. Definitely there can be opportunities to do that. And so our next guest is Jack Cox. He's president of Northbridge Business Advisors, and he's going to be talking about how to buy a business like a pro. He's worked with a lot of mergers and acquisitions on both sides, and really able to talk to what he's seen in terms of successful, unsuccessful, how you should approach it, because it's not easy. And most mergers and acquisitions do not succeed or meet the expectations of the people involved. So, it's important to get as much insight before you try and do something like that, so you can be one of the ones that is successful and people are happy with. So, next week we're going to be sharing that. What I'm going to do as we close out, I'm going to put the links in the chat, and we're going to do our closing segment. But as always, at the end of the day, as a business owner, the more you know, the faster your business can grow.
Thank you for listening to Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Leadership Live is one of the many valuable resources provided through the Small Business Pro University, empowering business owners to learn, profit, and grow. Find out more at sbpro.u.com.